Oncology Data Advisor holds the utmost value for patient advocates and advocacy groups as they strive to prioritize patient-centered care and shared decision-making throughout the cancer journey. At this year's ASCO annual meeting, Oncology Data Advisor spoke with numerous individuals representing diverse aspects of oncology and asked them how they strive to partner with patients in their practice, research, and advocacy work.
I think the buzzword is shared decision making. That's sort of number one on my thing. Making sure you're asking the patient about their needs. So there might be standard of care, but every patient is unique. So really talking to patients, make sure they understand about the research, make sure you talk to them about their lifestyle beyond cancer, beyond after the treatment is over. Hopefully everyone can be cured, right? But really having that shared decision making process. So you get to know the patients, you get to know their needs, you tell them their options, you discuss the options with them, and then you make a decision together. So it's educational, but also informative as far as like what the patient really needs outside of just chemo, radiation. Like what will work best for their lifestyle. They might have a very active lifestyle. They might not want radiation. They might want to have children. They might want to not have a certain type of drug that will prevent them from having children. Right. So I really think that my whole goal has been ever since I was diagnosed to bridge the gap between healthcare providers and patients and survivors. So we work together to, first of all, one-on-one to make that decision as far as care, but then also let us help you. If you're doing research, let us help you lend that patient voice to what you're doing from the very beginning so that you can be the most successful, because we want all of our healthcare partners and clinicians and oncologists to be as successful as possible, and we want to help share what worked for us and what didn't work for us so we can help make them better healthcare providers.
So genetic counselors, obviously since we're patient focused anyway, right? We're always looking for organizations, advocacy organizations, and groups that we can partner with, and even when we're with patients and we give results back within our network, we have resources that tie people into the advocacy organizations. So if I saw somebody and provided them with a result that we found as specific gene mutation, we could lead them to organizations that help them and support them, and with resources. So yes. We're very patient focused.
I mean, ultimately, every single treatment decision that we make is a shared decision, right? When we talk about this in the clinic, and we're fortunate to be at an institute where we have clinical trials, right? And so the clinical trials are truly a shared decision making, right? As we go through the different options, we talk about these are the options that are available at this point in time, and there's treatments A, B, and C. These are the relative benefits of A versus B versus C. And then what's important to you, right? So what matters to the patient? You know, if you look at renal cell carcinoma, if you look at the NCCN guidelines, there's so many options that you can use in front line and second line. There's not one that's preferred. And that reason is because we have great data for all of them. So it really does come down to what matters to the patient, right? So are they in a situation where they really want to avoid a pill and they want to do a double IO therapy? Are they in a situation where they travel farther away? So potentially coming every 6 weeks versus every 4 weeks makes a difference, right? Are they in a situation where they really care about what happens in that first scan and they're not looking to that long term? Or do they care about potentially be off treatment long term? And so there's so many factors that come into play. And so, you know, it really, I sort of take it as an honor to help guide that decision, but not to make that decision, right? Ultimately, the patient makes the decision, and I'm there to provide some guidance and some knowledge to help make that the best decision possible for them at that given point in time, with the understanding that every decision we make, we may have to tweak, right? I tell my patients all the time, there's no highways, it's all local roads. So we're gonna go and we're not gonna be getting on and going 90 miles per hour on the expressway. We're gonna be stopping at every point and saying, should we turn or keep going? And we just have to constantly reevaluate.
Absolutely. So this is really simple. It's something that we're always reminding ourselves is just listening, and listening with the intent to learn and curiosity, and coming in not necessarily assuming that you know what the right answer is going to be. We're in the interesting position of really wanting to listen to our kids. And sometimes what we hear from the kids is even different than what we hear from the parents and the patients. So I think just really centering the voice of the stakeholders and the folks that you're looking to serve, and being open to really changing things or trying things in a different way that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of. There's so much value in the perspective that we can get from our families, from the folks that we're working with directly. So lifting up that voice, but also if we're not listening, we can't champion and really meet the needs of the folks we're serving.
Well, I think it's truly a profound theme, and one that is sacred and must be at the heart of everything that we do, both in our day-to-day work, but also importantly to your question in terms of how we are training and mentoring people. I think the most important thing is for trainees to understand and articulate their passions, and to make sure that those passions and interests always, that when they're not sure or when they are unclear of the direction that their career or other things are going, is really come back to what is the inspiration for those passions, which almost always is entirely rooted in wanting to somehow contribute to and elevate the human experience, or to better serve our patients. So I think passion and remaining centered in the idea that passion is inspired by the patients whom we serve.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things with oncology patients is really, someone said that oncology standard of treatment is new therapies and research. So this really makes sure that those patients, all patients, can get those novel therapies, so that no one's being excluded. So I think that's one of the key that helps.
Yeah, I think it's really important for patients to be, aware of targets like HER2, especially in diseases where HER2 is not commonly tested or not commonly expressed. So I think it's really important to sort of make sure that there's a patient advocacy surrounding, active testing for rarer targets, and increased recognition of, to options available through clinical trials, as well as hopefully standard of care too.
I think one of the things the EOM is going to focus on, in addition to what the OCM did, is truly that patient partnership. Making sure that patients have a full understanding of the disease that they have, their prognosis, the treatment they're giving, and the potential outcomes and risks of that treatment is important to have that shared decision making with the patient. So in order for a patient to have true decision making about the care they're receiving, we need to spend time and energy in educating them about those things so they can make the best decision for themselves.
Yeah, I think that we have America's very diverse. We have a really diverse patient population. Cancer knows no boundaries, so it affects everybody. And our systems have privileged a certain subset of the population that tend to be better represented in clinical care, better represented in research. And so by starting to ask these questions, by starting to open a dialogue and create spaces that are welcoming and visually show that you're welcoming to a variety of patients, including sexual and gender minorities from a variety of race, ethnicities, nationalities, backgrounds, we have the opportunity to do it better. We have the opportunity to learn what's important to patients, help that guide clinical decision making, identify resources that are potentially LGBT specific or affirming for particular patients. So I think it's really about increasing the dialogue and being there for patients without making assumptions. And then hopefully, my hope is that someday our research and clinical enterprise will reflect kind of proportionally the diversity that we are.
So the first and most important thing is to get these results to our patients and to the community at large. One of the core missions of St. Jude, of course, is to disseminate all the information that we gather for free to everybody across the world. But more importantly, we want our patients to be able to act on the information. So, it may be 10 years before we develop a pharmaceutical intervention or some other kind of intervention for this brain aging phenotype. But there are things that our patients can do now. We want them to realize that. So being physically active, this is all in the non-cancer population. You can see this. There's a huge benefit for preserving brain age if you can maintain activity. And I don't mean going to the gym for 30 minutes a day and getting on a treadmill and lifting weights. Just staying physically active. Find a hobby that you're engaged in that you can do 3 times a week, tennis, swimming, whatever, and do that, and that will help maintain your brain age. And the other thing you can do is to be mentally gymnastics or mental fitness. So learning new things, and I'm not, again, don't have to go to college and learn calculus, but just pick up an activity that you're interested in and read about that, or engage in and learn new things, and that also will help preserve their brain age.
Great.
It's another great question, and as with the employers, one of the main barriers tends to be clinicians not talking with patients about these issues, about financial hardship or cost of care broadly, though that's certainly gotten better, but in specific about being able to work and how cancer and cancer treatment might affect their ability to continue working, at least in the same way that they're working now. And clinicians should be very open to talking about their patients. Patients want these conversations. They want advice from their clinicians. They trust their clinicians. And they want to get senses from them about how might my cancer and cancer treatment affect my job, affect my finances, affect the way I live beyond the treatment. So clinicians should be prepared for these conversations, should practice them, should know the kind of things to say, and should know outside resources that patients might be able to take advantage of to help them during this time.
So partnering with patients is also very important for Ontada, the U.S. Oncology Network, McKesson, Sarah Cannon Research Institute. So patients are front and center. So what we have been doing, and we recently did a study with University of Maryland looking at social determinants of health when it comes to doing research in community oncology. And the University of Maryland has what's called a patient program, which gives patients the opportunity to provide feedback to researchers, which can always not be good news, because you might get some information that you probably should have known but didn't know. So one of the walkaways is to reach out and engage patients. For some time, the Institute of Medicine has said that patients should be the center, should be part of the decision-making process. Actually making that happen is a bit challenging. One of the things we've done in Ontada, we have a patient portal called Ontada Health, and that gives an opportunity for patients, a platform to reach out to their physicians and their teams, but it also gives us an opportunity to reach out and provide educational information, provide opportunity to ask patients questions. I think moving forward, per the theme of ASCO this year, I think just as it was only a couple of years ago, the social determinants of health was a theme. I think we'll find moving forward more efforts, both academic settings, but also in community oncology settings, where there's more reaching out to the patient. I'll finish up by saying that we talked about social determinants of health. If you identify a patient with a barrier in terms of their health care, food insecurity, transportation, it's one thing identifying that, it's another thing doing something about it. So in our network, US Oncology, we are rolling out a platform called Find Help, where you actually, using the patient's zip code, you can identify resources that can address some of those barriers like food insecurity and transportation. So I think we're taking it to heart that our role is to improve patient care, and that journey certainly needs to involve the patient, not passively but actively. And just to say, not only the patient but their caregivers.
Well, I think patients are more, they're more involved in their care than ever. I think more people are becoming advocates for themselves. And so I think as a patient, just making them aware of what clinical trials are available, as well as standard treatments, just so they know all of their options before they start a new treatment. Also the schedule and the side effects and quality of life. Those are going to be things that are very important for our patients moving forward.
So there are two aspects to focus on when it comes to patients. One is whether there is any compromise to efficacy of the treatment. We use the guidelines that were put out by the Hematology Oncology Pharmacists Association and endorsed by NCCN. So we were fairly confident that these approaches will not compromise on patient quality of care or efficacy of these medications. The second space is patients are also sharing in the cost burden on these medications. And by implementing these dose rounding strategies, we have been able to bend the cost curve and save money for the healthcare system at large, but also reduce the patient burden of co-payments on those wasted medications.
General, so the sort of work that I do, and I guess you could kind of broadly put it, supportive oncology, you have to partner with patients, you know, and I think for me, a lot of the things I want to do is about improving the patient experience. So everybody's cancer journey has ups and downs, and obviously innovating on treatments and treatment paradigms and sequences of therapies is super important, and there's a lot of innovation in that space. I think also at the same time we have to be innovating and kind of supporting people's psyche through the whole thing and their families. And the only way you can do that is through patient-centered research, is just asking people how they feel, following them, taking that information and developing interventions that work for people that are, you have to partner with patients for that.
Absolutely essential. I think, for way too long we have been nursing and medicine, been in a vacuum, right, doing our science, and having those community collaborations is so important. In Nebraska, we have 500 miles across our state, and our patients have special needs. They're rural. They travel hundreds of miles to our only NCI designated cancer center in the state, and we really need to understand what is important to them and what they want to see in a program like this, and find out, can they and do they want to have distant type coaching, right, for their health, or especially for our rural folks, they're very embedded in their own communities. That's a question that we have at our site, is how is this going to look when we look at the data, the feasibility for our rural participants. So.
Yeah, and I would also just echo that it's essential to have the input of patients. We have patients need to be part of our studies as part of the study team. We have patient advocates that will kind of weigh in with us, and the community partnerships are absolutely essential. We need to better reach underserved populations, which historically we have not done very well at, and it's it's time to really get out there. So it's the community partnerships, working with patients themselves as we design our studies, it is absolutely essential.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And so, and that's, if you look back at my own personal history, I've been very interested in the research side of medicine. And, my dad was a PhD, I grew up in the lab, and I actually decided early on I wanted to be a physician because it would make me a better researcher. Right. That I was interacting with patients in the clinic, talking to patients, what are their concerns, what are the barriers, and seeing it from their point of view. So we're trying to bring in more patient advocates into the work we do. Another area where we got a lot of work to do, we need to do better, but we are starting to partner with patient advocates. But again, I think having MDs be involved in the research, the PhDs bring in tremendous wealth and skills and everything, but having that patient voice, whether it's the patient themselves or the clinicians' things, I think is so important to help make sure we're asking and answering the right questions.
This theme of partnering with patients translates well into my practice, because that, to be honest with you, is how I've built my practice from day one. It comes back to why I chose to become an oncologist, which is to be the patient advocate, having my own personal family history of cancer and wanting to make it better. And so the regimens that we choose in kidney cancer allow me to do that. Again, having multiple regimens with activity, slightly different tolerability profiles and administration schedules allows me really to sit there with the patient, make them a partner from day one in their care, learn what their goals are, what they hope to accomplish with their treatment, and then be able to individualize and select an appropriate therapy that I think, based on my experience and expertise, will get them to that goal.
So a part of the mission of Med News Week is to pick topics that are geared towards patients. Mm-hmm. we have a large patient audience of patients and patient advocates. That's what allows us to stream to all the platforms and really reach patients as well. We're trying to form partnerships with nonprofit organizations as well, and use that as an outlet to reach patients, provide them and connect them with these global leaders so that they're up to date on the latest information. And any way that we can be an asset and a resource, we will strive to do. All of our content, I just want to emphasize, is free. We're not being paid for this. We do this out of the passion and the mission that we have to really make a global impact. And that's really, I think, what sets us apart from other organizations, because everyone in our team is passionate about making a positive global impact. And I'm happy to see us continue to do that with each and every day.
Well, I think patients are really oftentimes uniquely excited to speak about their experiences, both the negative and the positive. And getting their perspectives is vital, especially for young oncologists who are just starting out, who may not have a lot of experience doing it on their own. They've seen the models of their mentors, and I'm sure get a lot of sense from that. But seeing it from the patient's perspective, they may really kind of say, hey, maybe I could do it a little differently. Maybe I could be a little bit, different in the way I deliver information, the way I explain things, so that patients feel supported. Oftentimes, we're tasked with a very difficult job, telling patients they have an incurable cancer, that we're going to fight like heck to make them better, but ultimately they are going to succumb to their illness. And that's a difficult message. And so knowing how the patient accepts that, how the patient receives that information, and how you can move forward from that, I think is a vital